Collision Course is back. Schedule B on Revolution Radio every Saturday night, 6 to 8 p.m. You get outer space. You get honest answers, real researchers, truthful answers, and a place to engage with questions. Take part in the discussion. Revolution Radio on freedomslips.com hosts Collision Course every Saturday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific Time.
I'm Reverend Medium Tracy Lockwood, and I'd like to invite you to join me as I discuss life from a medium's perspective. I'll be talking about insights that I've gained through readings, with topics like your guides, angels, animal communication, past lives, our transition, and the afterlife. We'll take a deeper look at the metaphysical meanings of symbols and totems, and I'll give you some practical exercises to help you develop your own natural psychic ability. Join me on From a Medium's Perspective.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Well, it's time to stumble down the road with host Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff and co-host Jenny Vaught as they carry stones, dig holes, and wield their shovels along the way. On Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. This is not a seated event. As they talk, run, stumble, carry, dig, drag, laugh, fight, sing and pray, dance and kick and scream, and oftentimes fall. Hey, is that a stone or a buffalo chick? Now, here are your hosts for the next 2 hours on carrying stones and digging holes. But I won't be there.
The hell I won't.
Hey everybody, this is Bridgette Lynn Dolgoff, your host of Carrying Stones, and this is my Saturday show, and you can find details about my show at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and I'm in Schedule A, and so you just look for the schedule on the left-hand side of the website, and you click on that and it'll give you Schedule A or Schedule B, and I'm in Schedule A. And then if you click that, you'll go on to the page and then you can scroll down to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is what my show is, and you'll see a picture of a bee with pollen flying towards a flower. That would be the picture for my show. Anyway, we also are listener supported, so you can also go to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and you can click on the funding areas and all kinds of amazing ways to help fund our network, and everything that all of the hosts do and the people who run the network do it 100% volunteer. So we can bring you insightful, educational shows. And so please help us, and please do what you can do. All right, so today, the last few weeks we've been going down the road of different kinds of things, mostly the legal paradigm. So this week we're returning back to my paradigm, which is dealing with food and seeds and all of those kinds of wonderful topics. So today I actually have somebody, and I don't know him. I just know him from Facebook, but I can't remember how exactly I found out about the Seeds of Preservation Independence. That's on Facebook. It's a group that you can join, and people are growing, it looks like, different kinds of native and heirloom seeds, and they post stuff. So if you grew some amazing stuff this year and you've got some native seeds or, plants or whatever else, you can get on there and post your photos and share. So Stefan, is it Stefan or Stephen? How do you pronounce it, Smith? Stephen?
Yes, correct.
Okay, great. So anyway, so my guest today is the person who has that website. Do you have a website or any other place that people can connect with you other than Facebook?
We do have a website. I believe it is, if you just Google Seeds of Preservation Independence, it will pop up. I don't have the link on me right now, but if they Google it, it will show up. It'll be a very colorful seed picture for the opening homepage.
Okay, great. So I want you to take as long as you can, but I usually have all the first time people, when I have them on the first time, I actually have them like kind of go through their past and their history until we got today, because there's always these interesting understandings with people about their experiences in their life and what has led them to doing the work that they're doing now. So could you go ahead and give us kind of a history about yourself?
Yep, I can do that. I'm originally from Clarksville, Tennessee. I'm 21 years old right now, but I will actually be 22 next Tuesday. And I was raised by both of my parents are retired professional crop breeders. So they, right before the whole GMO thing took off, they were still doing conventional breeding, crossing stuff by hand, mainly corn, wheat, soybeans, and barley. And they got to travel the entire world, Argentina, Europe. They were mainly stationed in Hawaii because that's where their nursery was. And so I was raised around seeds, and we always had a garden, broccoli, cauliflower, cabbage, potatoes, beans, carrots, basically, and everything that most people want to grow in their garden. I was always out there either helping harvest or helping plant, or just being a curious little kid and wanting to know what that was or what that was. And my dad had me out in his corn nursery. Even though they're retired, they still do some breeding work back home. And and my dad had me out there in the corn nursery when I was 3 years old, pollinating the little short Canadian native corn that I have. And that's, I guess, what really triggered my passion for corn. And I was always a plant nerd. I still am, actually. And originally, when I was in high school and middle school, my major was going to be botany, because I love plants and wildflowers and native herbs and everything like that. But when I was probably a sophomore and especially senior year in high school, I ended up diving into the world of heirloom seed, because my dad and mom both told me about some of the very unique looking corn varieties that have been in Mexico for thousands of years. And it piqued my interest, so I started kind of researching these things more and more. And one of the people that I knew, a botanist in Tennessee, she actually sent me a poster that had full color photographs of all these unique, brightly colored corns that I've never seen any color like that in before. And that's kind of, I think I was, actually, no, that was when I was 11 or 12. And then the older I got, the more I got into it, and the more I fell in love with corn. And then that kind of turned into falling in love with the three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. And that kept leading me into other seeds, peas, and potatoes, and tomatoes, and carrots, and basically any seed that was heirloom, because I was, being the scientific person I was keeping up with what was going on in the seed world, with all of these hybrids coming out, how these seeds that I was starting to collect and have people send me, how these were ending up almost extinct, or some of them had gone extinct. And it kind of just fueled me more and more to keep seed saving and get into it and make it basically what I want to do with the rest of my life. And fast forward to about 2014 or 2015, I believe it was. Baker Creek Heirloom Seed Company in Missouri, I got in with them as a grower for some of the Peruvian corn that they had imported. And so I was trying to adapt and grow it, because at that time that was my special research, was adapting other seeds from other parts of the world that may not necessarily grow or thrive here. And after about a couple years, late 2016, I went out to visit them in Missouri, and I was hired as their corn manager, curator there at their facility in Mansfield, Missouri. So I spent last year out there working for them and with them, and bringing new corns into the picture, as well as other seeds and everything that they were interested in. And a lot of it actually came from my personal collection. And in May of last year as well, they actually sent me to Cusco, Peru, to collect seed. Brought back probably about 80, 90, 100 pounds of squash and corn and beans and quinoa and everything from Peru when I went down there for them. And I was still finishing up college, so I kind of had to juggle that and then finish my bachelor's degree in agriculture, agri-science, crop research at Austin Peay State University, Clarksville, Tennessee, where I'm from. So I had to leave Baker Creek to finish my degree that I graduated in May of this year with. And late last the same time, actually, I think last year, I was still working on the Seeds of Preservation Independence. I actually found it in 2016. The people at Baker Creek, they asked me to speak at what they call the National Heirloom Seed Expo exposition in Santa Rosa, California. And I was out there this year because it was the 8th annual one. And over 20, 30,000 people attend this event, and it has workshops in it. You get to see all the diversity of eggplants and tomatoes and squash and bean, corn, and hear all these amazing people talk about various topics, from seed saving to healthy food to healthy farming ways, permaculture, everything and anything like that. And about 2 weeks before, when I first started speaking out there in 2016, I had already had the idea of wanting to found a nonprofit organization that would be able to connect with farmers in other countries and all over the United States and globally, and document and gather as many seeds as we could before we were either made or lost greatly. And I had great group of seed savers that I had already known for 2 or 3 years at that point, that were really into what I wanted to do and believed in me. And we formed a miniature board of directors, and the abbreviation Seeds of Preservation Independence. It was founded 2 weeks before the expo in 2016, and it's continued on since then. It kind of operated the same way starting in 2015. I never actually did much else with it outside of my personal collection, which the organization kind of took on my personal collection of various seeds and plants that people had sent me to keep going so they weren't lost forever. And then with Soapy finally being founded, I finished my degree last October, late November. I was contacted by a author that I met at the 2016 Expo, Dr. William Boys Weaver, the father of the heirloom seed movement itself. And he was interested in asking me about some issues that he was having with a Native American corn. And we talked it through, and I told him what I know, because interest is mainly genetic. He calls me the corn geneticist because the whole genetics part of heirlooms and everything is kind of my main area of expertise and focal point. But we sorted, and I happened to make the comment, not really thinking anything of it. It would be great to work with you at Roughwood in Devon, Pennsylvania. And he said, we do need a manager. He said, come visit us. We'll do the interview and see what we think. And I went up there and visited him over Thanksgiving and went back after Christmas for the New Year's. And I actually started as the Roughwood Seed Collection Manager in January. And I moved from the Kentucky area, so I lived on the board, to Pennsylvania after I graduated from college in May. And that's where I currently live at, is in Devon, Pennsylvania. Soapy is still based back home because the seed bank, the Carol Louise Smith seed bank, that is the part of Soapy itself that was the original seed bank I founded for everything, named after my late grandmother. It's still held back home. My parents oversee the seed stock that is in it. Some stuff with me to Pennsylvania, but most of it is still either held back home or our vice president / general manager, Pam Kimsey in Texas. She's also a backup of most of the stuff that Soapy is. And Soapy is in a process right now of it'll be going underneath the mother umbrella of Roughwood, where I currently also work at as well, which is also kind of just like Soapy, but it's a more deeply rooted collection that was started by William after he found his grandfather's seeds in the fruit. And it's profit, and Soapy is not a official nonprofit just yet because we haven't been able to raise the funds to do for work and everything to get this 501c3 status that we want. So since Roughwood is a nonprofit, Soapy will be going underneath it as a sub-organization, and thus it'll become a true nonprofit, so we can actually have larger donations from interested parties, with grants and everything like that. So that's kind of where I'm at modern day now. It's juggling Soapy and Roughwood all at once.
Awesome. So we do have a little bit of a delay, it sounds like, in the call, but it's all right. It is what it is, right? So one of the things is, we haven't really had a discussion, so we don't really know each other that well. So I'm learning lots of things about you. I'm writing them down. I always take notes of all my guests. One of the things, same kind of thing happened to me. I wish it would have happened a lot younger, but it took me until I was like late 30s, and then I decided I wanted to grow my own herbal plant medicine. So that because I had a private practice as a traditional osteopath. So I wanted to also start making my own medicines. And so that took me on this major journey of, permaculture. And I ended up being on farms. And then I ended up going to Steiner College, learning biodynamics. And the same thing happened. I went to biodynamics and I started learning a lot of the remedies, and I became like a total soil microbial mass, soil restoration nerd, just kind of like go off the total deep end. So I could totally relate, So one of the things recently that happened is that I started getting seeds, and a friend of mine sent me a huge bulk of native seeds, and then I grew a small garden. And so now I'm like kind of addicted to the seeds. And so next year I'm working on having land so that I can start doing seed outgrows, to actually help in preservation of seed, of native seeds, and getting them, back into the communities in which they belong, and sharing. So it's really exciting to actually talk to you. So because I have, up until today, I didn't really know your history, and you have a great history. It's like, go, 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 go. That's so good. The seeds are
Yeah, that's basically the world I live in, is go, because each year it's trying to be sure that things are grown out and that we maintain enough stock ourselves to not only preserve the genetics of the variety in case we would have failure ourselves, or if a soapy grower would happen to have a failure and they accidentally planted all of the seeds, that the variety wouldn't go extinct. And we've had that happen a couple times, I'm to say. But a lot of the Native Americans we have, since I am part Cherokee, Native Cherokee from the Eastern Band, my grandmother's great-grandmother, she actually walked the Trail of Tears. So the Native American seed is something that I take very seriously, because it's an obsession at this point. So, but one thing that we do at Roughwood and at Soapy as well is that we give back to these native communities. One of the corns that I had actually had for 2 or 3 years, called Mohawk round nose corn, I didn't really know hardly anything about it until I connected with a local Iroquois seed keeper up in Canada. And he happened to ask me one day, "Hey, do you have this round nose corn?" I said, I said, "I don't know anything about it, but I have it." And he told me, he said, "Well," he said, the up here that it came from, the family of Elizabeth Bush, it's extinct. Someone planted some of their corn down the road from the family, and it got crossed, and the variety was completely because no one else had it." So I did a grow out of that. I think it was in 2016. The round nose corn, and I sent seed stock in 3 or 4 ears up to the seed keeper to be put back into the community been lost from, and it would have been lost forever had someone like me not happened to have been sent the seed. But I love doing stuff like that, because it just gives you a different perspective of this, how relatively easy it is for something like that to kind of just disappear off the map. And if no one else is interested in it, or they don't want to grow it, or it gets contaminated, that's usually the end of a particular variety or something that possibly could have existed for hundreds of thousands of years, like that particular corn had. But I love hearing that you too love the native seeds, because it's something that I'm deeply dug into, and I'll never get out of it because I'm too obsessed with it all.
Well, it's interesting because if you have any windows open on your computer, it might be slowing down your Skype a little bit. So because there's just a little bit of a delay, so we can just get the best, bandwidth. Anyway, oh, hold on. I just lost him. Let's get him back on. Hold on a second. Let's see if we can get him back on. We lost him. Are you there?
I'm there. It just cut out.
Hold on a second. Oh, Okay, hold on a second. Let me I don't know why you're on video. Did I call you by video?
I think I probably hit video. So
Okay. Yeah, you can.
I'm not used Skyping so long. So
Yeah, so you go ahead and get rid of the video part, and then let me just make sure. Yeah, I think we're on. We're okay now. All right, are you there?
okay, there we go.
Yeah, and I think
I'm there.
we're still.
Okay.
Think we're still. Yeah, we look like we're still on the network, so we're all good. All right,
Mhm.
so yeah, no, I'm just going to tell you kind of a story, right, about the native seeds and what happened. Is I started to realize like the seeds. Actually, the seeds that I got this year from somebody who does native seed outgrows, he said, let me send you a package of seeds. So I'll just tell you what happened. So, I do a lot of native type stuff. And I come from a lineage of like a shamanism lineage from Russia. And so, I know that let's just say there's interesting multiple like dimensional stuff that can go on. And so when the seeds started coming to me in the mail this last spring, like probably the second night they were in the mail, I woke up in the middle of the night, like 2:00 in the morning, and I could hear native people singing. I mean, just loud and drumming, and I just totally was like, whoa, I wonder what the heck is going on. So I called a friend of mine and I told her about the experience, and she said, well, aren't those native seeds being sent to you in that package? And I said, yeah. And she goes, well, those are, the ancestors and the protectors, and, they're singing their way to you. They're like in ceremony, to help you with the seeds. And so you'll get the seeds in a good way, and, you'll grow them and you'll learn from them and everything else. So anyway, so from the moment that they got sent to me, it was like, out of this world kind of experience. So I really got serious about the seeds when I got them. I'm like, all right, I'm dealing with something that is probably supernatural. It looks physical, but it has some, supernatural aspects to it. So I just kind of planted a few of the type of corn that I had. I think it was like it looked like a red crystal gem. I think it was like a Hopi quick corn or something like that. So I just did a few stalks to do, a test run. But I also grew some Hopi sunflowers. I grew a whole bunch of 7 varieties of native beans. And I grew some popping sorghum from indigenous people in India. And then I also got some tulsi, which is that holy basil, And so I'm growing all this stuff. And then I'm adding other things in. And I'm doing it out in the desert. A friend of mine has an old garden I'm cleaning up. And so I really did a lot of work. And so during the process of this corn and stuff growing, I had to do some traveling. And so this native woman started coming around here who was Seneca, but she didn't know about her, background or being a native person or a native woman until she moved to Reno, and she studied with a traditional Lakota teacher. And so she's adopted, the Lakota way. Anyway, so she starts coming here because she knows the guy who lives here. And then I said to her, I need to figure out what I'm going to do with the corn. It obviously called you here so that it could, meet you. And so she's saying like Lakota song over the whole area, and you could feel like the corn, vibrate. And then she said, yeah, she'll take it. So we're going to, in small ways, give it around to the native people around here. But she's also going to use some of it in ceremony because she's building a new lodge. And so she wants to use it there, and give it a really high purpose. So it's been kind of an interesting thing watching this corn and how it's like more than it physically alive, right? It's communicating with the world like around it, and in kind of like, for listeners out there, maybe a supernatural way. It's bringing the people to it that need it or need to be restored back to it, it's like this corn knows the native people from a really, really long time, and some of it's been away from them. And it's interesting how it like starts bringing them back. It's like, like in this energetic kind of a way. But I have to tell you, like when I planted the corn, it made people crazy here on the land. Not the the native person that came, but I watched like some of the other people kind of go nuts. And I realized, well, it's just the corn. And every time I'd see situations like that, I would just say, the corn's working on him.
Yep.
The corn is working on him, and that's all there is, right? So I just have to leave it to the corn. I'm like, okay, I can't get involved because whatever it's going on, it's the corn. And so for the moment it was planted, and then as soon as it sprouted, it was like everything, even in my life, that was underneath, that I hadn't really dealt with, some of the last issues, or issues relating to maybe farming and growing seeds and working with seeds, and those like uprooted, and I was just kind of hit a level of freedom as soon as the corn started to come up. So the corn, so the whole duration of the corn. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is that I haven't seen the native woman. I saw her yesterday. She came out, and I showed her the corn I'm driving and all these other seeds, and she's going to take them, to the people and use them in ceremony. But the interesting thing was that the person who lives here has a licensed, medical marijuana, a few plants. And the plants, his plants ended up getting planted sort of near all my native plants that I grew. Mm-hmm. And it changed them. The corn and the Hopi sunflowers, the corn that I planted got very purple stalks on it, and like the outside of the cobs, the skin was like dark purple, and almost, some of them were almost purple black. And so it's interesting because on the not on the leaves, but on the stems of the leaves, on the bigger leaves on those plants, she showed it to me yesterday, they're purple. So they adopted something from the corn, and they adopted something from the Hopi sunflowers, because the Hopi sunflowers stalks are green, but they start to, as fall comes along, they start to get this purple color. And so it's the same purple color that's on the stems of the guy's, stuff. But she was saying, as a native woman, she said, she goes, I bet you that medicine that's being grown is going to be amazing, because the corn communicated it with the Hopi sunflowers. Mm-hmm. And it gave it some, supernatural, medicine probably. But it was a really interesting thing to notice. She came out and noticed that, about how the imprint of the corn and the other native plants, imprinted together, and then also have a overlying imprint over any of the other plants that were growing there. So anyway, do you have any thoughts about that? I mean, it's kind of it's an out there story, but I think that you've probably dealt with enough of these seeds that you probably have some out there stories about them as well.
Yeah, it's to other people probably listening, it sounds probably rather odd, but I fully understand exactly this what you were saying, because the corn has a very strong energy within itself anyway. And I always tell people when I give lectures that they have to kind of step back from the modern way of thinking and look back into the older generations of our ancestors and realize that corn was a religion. It was not just a plant, it was a full-blown religion. Because all of the native tribes in North America, they adopted it from Mexico and Central and South America, because corn originated in Mexico. And all of this ancient energy and all of the spiritual beliefs and ceremonies that it's been connected with for thousands of years, since like 7000 BC, corn can remember both modern science terms with DNA, but also with just the spiritual connection and the energy that the plants give off. A lot of the sacred, what's defined as sacred corn that usually is a very interesting color. I have some from the Navajo that has white kernels, and it has a black blot top of it. They look like eyes staring back at you. And it's their sacred eagle corn. And the Hopi had one, the Pawnee have one. Almost every tribe had some form of sacred corn. That you have the eagle corn that was taken across the Trail of Tears that I also grow. But the whole energy and the communication, it's something that I always see in my garden when I grow stuff, that if this corn plant here does something weird, then the squash or something beneath or next to it, it'll end up throwing a weird fruit that is nothing like it's supposed to be. And a story that comes to mind from, I think, a couple years ago that kind of reminds me of what you experienced. I was at an event in Tennessee with one of my seed friends, and I had a display of all of the soapy corn and beans that I currently had grown since it was October, same time as now. And I had a jar of a particular corn that I have from Paraguay called Avati Maroti. And I had a couple ears of it because it's a yellow and black flower corn that the native Guarani tribe down there grows and uses in their medicine. They make drinks out of it, make cornbread out of it, and mush, and a whole bunch of other things. And I had a jar of it along with probably at least a dozen other. And this family, the mother and her kids, they come walking by to investigate my little booth. And the daughter, she was probably, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years old, if even that. And she looks over and she sees this jar of this Paraguay corn. And out of everything that was there, she picks it up and she holds on to it. And her mom tells her to let go of it because she didn't want me mad at her for picking up something, because I had signs laid out, do not touch. And she tells her daughter, let go of it, put it back, and she won't let go of the jar. Her mother has to pry it from her fingers to put it back on the table and apologizes to me. And as she takes it out of her hand and they start walking off, the little girl starts crying, and she keeps turning around and reaching back out to grab the same jar. And after she apologized and they kind of left, it kind of hit me, because Avati Maroti Mita in the native Guarani language translates to small child corn. And it's one of the weird things that I've had happen to me that I've not forgotten it, because it really touched me very deeply that day when that happened, because I'm like, well, clearly somehow the corn communicated with that little girl because she wanted it and she wanted to grow it. So I actually saw the family before they left later that evening. I was selling some of the corn to people, but I took 2 or 3 samples of it, probably 200 or 300 seed, and I walked over and I asked her mother. I said, "Weren't you the one with the little girl that tried to pick up the corn?" And she said, "Yes." What's wrong, or what did she damage? I said, "Nothing." I said, "I just wanted to give you 2 or 3 pounds of corn because it was clear to me that she really wanted it and wanted to grow it." So I handed it to her mother, and her mother handed it to the little girl, and her face lit up like the happiest person in the world, big smile, and she couldn't stop staring at the packets. And I told her mother how to grow it and how to save the seed and keep it going. And she said that they wanted to grow squash. And I said, you can do the squash around it. It'll help keep the weeds out of it. But evidently, the Avati Maroti Mita, it's named small child corn by the tribe because it's early and it's only like 3 or 4 feet tall. But in another sense of it now, to me, I see it as a very special corn. It seems like in spiritual energy way. It seems like it was actually able to connect with children. I don't know. It's just a memory that I've not forgotten, and it's one of my favorite things that has happened with seed work that I've actually done.
Yeah, that's a great story. Thanks for telling that story. And yeah, that's the thing is, like, now I'm like, you know, I'm still working on my microbial mass and soil restoration, but I kind of feel like, you know, like the seeds are kind of pulling me in, you know, and they're introducing me to people, you know, to help them, kind of a thing. You know what I mean? And make sure that they survive.
Yeah, I think the seeds. Well, I say I think, but the native background that I have, it's usually it's a whole different perspective. But the seeds are social just as much as humanity is itself, and most plants don't want to be by themselves because it's a threat to their own diversity within themselves. If they happen to self-pollinate like a tomato can, if corn did that, it would ruin what the corn is because it can't handle it. And I think because these seeds have been spread around the world for so long, and they've been with so many cultures for so long, and they're used to just being with not only others of their same species, but other plants, and just being passed down from generation to generation. I think they do realize that they have an ability to not only connect us with them, but they can connect us with other people, like you were saying, and that's something that I always keep in mind, because some of the stuff I have in what I grow, I would have never got to meet some of the amazing people I know in the seed world had it not been for that particular variety, or for trying to seek out this particular seed from another state or from Mexico or something. And it's an interesting thing. And I always also tell people that, remember, there's a lot that goes on underneath the soil with the microbial masses and everything that you were mentioning. All plant life has the ability to communicate back and forth with each other through that network. And corn can do it with if it's medical cannabis, it can do it with that. Like what have you do it with squash or beans or something like that. But all these messages that we don't ever really see or hear, they're always passed down and passed through, and unless they vibrate, so to speak, really highly, we don't usually ever realize it or know exactly. But I always try to think of corn and all the other plants that they're all connected and they all can speak with each other, and they can teach us a lot if we just stop and listen and kind of be open-minded more so.
Yeah, I have just kind of another story, because I'm just, picking your brain. You're going to be on my speed dial. No, I'm just kidding. I'll be like, I gotta call him and talk to him about this. Hey, yeah, so a lot to learn. I know that I have a lot to learn with the corn. But okay, so out in the desert right now, I kind of live in my van because, I cruise around, and because some of this work requires that you kind of have to, be on your feet, and not be, totally stuck where you're at, kind of a thing. So I'm living in my van, but I stay on a friend of mine's property out in the desert in northern Nevada. And I'm talking desert. I mean, there's a bunch of sand dunes right on the edge of the street that people ride their quads and stuff on. So one of the things that was trippy about it, and I did little videos about the corn and stuff on my YouTube channel as I went along, and one of the most unbelievable things that happened was that here we are out in the middle of the desert, And as soon as I dug out that garden and I put natural stuff in it, I found some really good old horse poop and wood chips from trees, that had been cut for firewood. And I just tried to do really natural because, sand, I have to turn it into dirt to get it to grow to anything, which means I have to put a lot of, mulch and stuff in it for the microbes to eat. So, but one of the things that happened was I have videos of like how many insects, and I don't even know where these guys came from. It was like they appeared out of nowhere. But I had like giant praying mantises. I had spiders even show up that I've never seen before. I had this white albino spider with red eyes, and it had 2 horns on its back. And then, and the praying mantises were really surprising in how big they were. And I would get these, more so than just a few dragonflies. They were like clouds, these teeny little dragonflies that were like turquoise and dark blue, and there were like clouds of them. So when I'd walk through in the morning, to go look at the garden, it was like my foot would push out and then there would be energy around it and you can see them all move. And so then all kinds of assortments of bees I've never even seen in the area, hornets, and every type of insect showed up into my garden. I even think that I actually had some kind of monarch butterfly caterpillar on one of my plants. So it was just like a total trip of, like what the corn, and I'm sure the Hopi sunflowers and the beans and everything else, like you were saying. But here you're out in the middle of the desert and you have all these insects that are now, all of a sudden come from nowhere and living in this garden environment. It was a total trip. Being totally out in the desert and usually never seeing a lot of those insects, and just like what the corn was attracting. And I was thinking about what you said, that, they're like a community and they kind of know that their survival depends on being able to have a relationship and be in community. And so they would need all those insects to help pollinate them and keep them healthy and, eat the bad insects off of them. But it's just, even though I believe kind of in the duty, the corn really blew my mind this summer, like on all levels, and it's hard to, I'm really excited to talk to you now because I was excited to talk to you before, but now I'm really excited to talk to you because now I have somebody who would understand, kind of like what my experiences have been this summer that have just really rocked me, in a good way. So do you have anything, do you have anything to add to that? You probably hear this kind of stuff all the time. You're like the native corn counselor.
I hear it. Okay. I hear it from time to time. I don't hear this stuff off. People don't want to talk because they think, well, I'm going to sound like I'm the most crazy person in the world right now. But I don't know. It is very interesting and it's very powerful at the same time. Just what corn and all of these other plants that have been grown by these groups and these civilizations for thousands of years. And even with when I do the I get bunch groups of working spiders like you have. I've seen a bunch of praying mantises this year. That this was the first time I've seen any, at least. And more than seeing one maybe throughout the whole summer. A ton of bees, native bees, not even honeybees, but actual true native bumblebees that were pollinating the squash. And all of these was like experience that were being attracted to the corn and other stuff that I was growing with it. And all life is, again, interconnected from my perspective, and it all can speak to each other in its own unique way, whichever way it decides to do it. So it's something that a lot of people don't and when they grow corn, they just grow it, and they don't think that much of it unless they have experiences like you and I have. And usually, if they do, they probably think they're crazy, but they're not, because alone. And I always have that the experiences I have, it's not always the I'm the person that this is happening to. I know people out there, they just don't really talk about it unless you bring it up. And usually the older the variety or the heirloom, whatever it is that one chooses to grow, the stronger that connection and that history and the energy spirituality is. The two oldest corns in the world that are nearly extinct, but they still exist in very isolated regions of Central America and Mexico. They were the first corns to have ever, true real corn as we know it today, to have ever appeared. And these are the ancestors of like the Hopi corn that you're growing. And this, they're both popcorn. One of them is chapalote, and it is a brown popcorn. I call it chocolate corn because it looks like chocolate. And the other is called nalteo, which is rooster corn in the native Mayan language. And I grew both of them this year. And they just radiate with so much history and almost like memory, like you would touch the stalk and suddenly you were surrounded by all of ancient people tending the garden and harvesting it and preparing it for ceremony, preparing tamales out of it, other stuff like that, because it's the that really made the corn what it is, and it's partially why a lot of this stuff still exists, at least the ceremony and sacred value that a lot of these seeds have, because corn built the Americas, and that's why it became a religion. It fed so many people, and they realized it, even though the wild grass teosinte that corn came from was really rather useless in the sense of the seed is it's hard as a brick. You can chip a tooth if you try to eat it raw. And these natives, our ancestors, they took this wild grass and domesticated it, kept selecting it, putting all their time and energy, creating the Hopi corn that we know today, all the other of land races of corn that exist across the and just the diversity is really what surprised when I started getting into corn and everything. And I guess that's why I now have the largest collection of non-GMO corn within within North America, outside of government-funded programs. I have at least 1,900 different heirloom corns, and it's probably closer to about 1,000 now. And I have all of this beautiful and rare and unique stuff. And every time I grow it, I always get surprised by some kind of energy that it gives off, or just seeing it grow. If it's been a day or something, I can go out and see that the corn is actually ready to harvest, or it's germinating. I know it kind of boosts your mood a little bit, and that's also why I enjoy gardening, because it always helps me feel better, and also gives me a different perspective of how nature works and how we can live in harmony with it, like our ancestors were growing all of this stuff originally.
I totally agree, 100%. Yeah, just getting everything that you said. Okay, so this is an interesting thing. I just learned this year because I started growing corn, so I have an interest. But he's telling us that corn was originally a grass, and there's still some from people that I've talked to that do like large scale land restoration. They're trying to put it back to the native as close as possible. But they like to plant a lot of these seeds that are some of the original kind of grass. from corn grass, or a species of grass that turned into corn. And then also too, this year I learned about sorghum. And sorghum was a trip. It looks like a corn plant. And then, I grew a popping sorghum. And it's little, you pop it like little popcorns. And I looked in India and researched that, and it said that, it's considered a grass, right? It's in the grass. So I have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What would be your position on, there are some other people that I've talked to that end up, I don't know if I want to call them traditionalists, but they're working with land restoration and trying to get native seeds and stuff and back into these areas so that the water can be filtered through, the water holds in those areas so there's no flooding, and then it helps to replenish the aquifer. And some of them have issues about, growing native plants that were what they consider were not in America. I don't know a lot. I just know from growing the native plants this year and the corn that it seems like to me that wherever these plants travel, that even if they come from another place like India, and they can oh, hold on, we're going to commercial. We'll be right back.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Enter into a world unseen on Raven Star's Witching Hour. You will encounter eclectic topics from the realm of spirit brought into our matrix of truth. With your host, the Solaris Blue Raven. Solaris will bring you an array of unique guests covering topics from ghostly spirits to amazing anomalies, covert technology, UFOs, and shadowy global events.
And that's right here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, Saturdays, midnight till 2 a.m. Eastern Time. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
Let the magic rise.
This is Barbara DeLong, host of Nightlight Radio, inviting you to join me on a cosmic journey, exploring a metaphysical montage of spiritual material, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between, including spiritual readings for those who seek enlightenment. Let Nightlight provide you with equal measure of light, love and laughter, insight, wisdom, and inspiration. Monday nights, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern, right here on Studio B, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Hey there. Hey, we're back carrying stones and digging holes. And I have a great guest. I don't know. I always have, whenever I have seed people on lately, sacred, I call them the sacred seed people. Something happens, like just really shifts me. And so it's like some of my favorite conversations are about seeds and native seeds and their abilities. But anyway, so I was going to ask you a question, and then we're going to talk about the corn. That's always been a mother kind of an idea after that. But okay, so back to what I was trying to say. So I guess I kind of feel, I guess this comes down more to a feeling, but I feel kind of dealing with some of these other people I'm dealing with. I feel that they may be disincluding a lot of important plants. And from what I'm learning from native plants is wherever they travel is where they need to be, right? So even if a native plant, came from another place, it does, I want to start working on large-scale land restoration too, but I don't want to leave out any native plants. I feel like I could create, really good, healthy, healing habitats with using, plants that may have been in the Americas or that come from other places. And I only learned that this year. What's your opinions? I mean, if you're doing large-scale native, like say native to North America landscapes, to do restoration, do you think that there's only these kinds of seeds we should use that were here originally? But from talking to you, all these plants have come from somewhere else, right? I mean, really?
Oh, really, a lot of the stuff that we kind of consider native to the Americas, it was either first cultivated or first domesticated in another country, and it just came over. And I can understand where some of these folks that you're communicating with, I can see their viewpoint. Native plants for most people are what is found in your area, your state, or at least within North America itself. But for me, I don't necessarily limit my mind to just that, because a lot of these other plants that came from other countries, they have incredible land restorative value. Most people have the concern that a lot of the stuff that was brought over, well, it's extremely invasive. It chokes out native vegetation. It's bred this disease or something along those lines. And I also see it from that standpoint, and we fight a lot of the invasives, both back home and in Pennsylvania, that have been brought over mainly as ornamentals. But when you get into the heirloom seed world, it's a whole different perspective. I kind of like to think of heirloom seeds as native plants, kind of in that sense, because that's really, to me, what they are. A lot of these heirlooms from other parts of the world, and even the native corns that came from North America, or the other seeds that showed up here, they were raised a way to grow within unison with their own community of whatever they were being planted with, the Three Sisters, a milpa, ever how they were being grown, as well as getting where they plant it to also either add nutrients to the soil like beans and peas and other legumes do, or just being able to grow in horrible soil that maybe this is where this sorghum came from in India or in Africa, and someone wants to do something to at least try to get some grain or help the soil, then they can go select that particular heirloom sorghum or cowpea, whatever it may be, and they can grow it in another part of the world where it'll basically do the same thing it did in its home country. There's a lot of spiritual energy related shaman stories connected with a lot of the corns that I curate, and some of them are used for the sole purpose of ceremonial use only, They're planted to renew the soil in the area, both physically and spiritually. And they can also be used in medicine for blessings and protection and healing. And usually some of the sacred corns I have that I know the story that's what they were used for. They're usually what I actually plant on a either in a garden or my raised bed if I want to try to restore it if it's been overplanted or it's freshly obtained and it's not really worked on just yet, or if I've kind of had to leave it be. But I can understand why they would be kind of hesitant to use other plants and other seeds from other countries, but they have to come to the realization eventually that almost everything we know as native food, so to speak, most of it was domesticated in another country. Corn, beans, squash, cotton, tomatoes, potatoes, all of that came from Central and South America. And cowpeas and sorghum and stuff like that came from regions like Africa. Rice and wheat came from Europe. And so I don't limit myself to just true native, like wildflowers and native grasses. I do incorporate a lot of these unique heirlooms that I maintain and work with because they can survive in just such horrible conditions as whatever most of us just trying to overcome in our own garden or field or yard, wherever we're going to plant it or in.
All right. So all that was a good answer because it's been something that's been really on my mind. And because I want to be able to like look at areas or go to people's yards or, create edible landscapes. And another thing too is, these native plants, no matter where they come from. Okay. So the beginning of the hour, we kind of talked about how the corn can influence any plant. The native corn, wherever it's at. The Hopi sunflowers too did some influencing in the yard, in the little garden I grew. So if say you because I don't want to leave any plants out. I mean, what if the one plant that I need for this whole habitat, to come together, for the bees and the soil and the all the insects and the animals and the birds, what if that one plant is, from India? What if it was like a popping sorghum that needed to come in, and be a part of that habitat? I wouldn't want to, like you said, close my mind to spirit working, like, okay, I need the piece of the puzzle to pull this together, and I get popping sorghum in the mail, and I'm like, okay, well, I can't plant it, but yet that's what spirit sent to me, right? They sent me the answer to, the thing. So I don't want to leave any options out, about, what should be planted and what could be planted, right? The other thing too is the native plants, like you said, they grow in anything. Like I had sand to work with pretty much, and I did put a few, natural remedies in it, just for the microbes to eat, so it'll be better soil next year. But the native plants that I grew, compared to the heirlooms, from like Baker Seed catalog, I was mad at the Baker Seeds this year because the plants did so terrible compared to the native. The natives just went bam, and they were just like crazy. It was like macheting down the stuff. And here's the heirlooms from Baker Seeds, like not even really desiring to be there. So. Native seeds are these ones probably would have grown under any kind of horrible condition. So out here in the desert, the sand dune.
Those great sand dunes.
Yeah.
Oh. It's astounding when you look at native plants and most of us we're used to nice soil and easy access to water and all this stuff, and you have a native plant and it's kind of like, well, just put me somewhere. I don't really care where, even if it's your sand dune. Just put me here. I'm going to grow because I'm used to it and it doesn't bother me. And I always find it astounding how native plants kind of feel like they have that mindset where they're like, just put me here. I don't care where.
No, that is exactly what I learned. I mean, the other crazy thing was somehow some of the seeds that I did plant ended up outside of the fenced area. So the ones that I was trying to keep in the fenced area, they started traveling on their own. They started making their way. And yeah, I just couldn't believe like how harsh the conditions could be and they could still grow. That was just, that blew my mind. You know, the other thing that blew my mind? Oh, well, so before I planted the native corn, and then we'll talk about, we'll talk about the corn as a mother and whatever else that you think is really important for listeners to talk about. But, I lost my train of thought. I was like so excited about it.
I do that all the time.
I know. I'm like, oh my God, I'm talking to somebody. I'm talking to somebody who understands corn. I'm like, oh my God, hold on. I'm serious. Super excited about this conversation. Yeah. Okay. So the thing that blew me away so I planted one type of corn. All the seeds were pretty similar. They were like reddish, maybe had a little white on them, and they were kind of had crystally. They reminded me of crystals, like if you found like red quartz crystals. But the thing that blew me away was like how different, each stalk grew a different color. Some were green, some had red lines down them, some were purple, some were darker purple, and then some were black purple. And it was all from the same, handful of seeds, right? And how diverse just the stalks grew. And then when I harvested them, because I decided that, I wasn't going to eat them, a couple of the cobs I did put into a chili. I made like a native type, chili. And I put the corn in there to like honor it, and respect it by ingesting it, and whoever ingested it. But I was so blown away because I took the cobs and I was going to use them for other people to give in this area because, like you said, I grew them here, so they've adapted a little bit to this environment. And then also use them for ceremony mostly. So when I was taking, the outer layer off and looking at the actual cobs, I was so blown away at how different they were. And there really wasn't any cobs in there that had the original colored seed, 15 seeds I used. It was just a trip. One of the cobs had like, it was like almost all black seed, it was just totally, it was like a Christmas thing, and you're opening them going, okay, what's this one going to look like?
That is me. Every time I shell beans or husk corn, I'm like, I want to see it. I want to see it.
I know. No, you're just like, oh my God, what's going to be in there? And then you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. Like, what the?
Yeah, because as much as all of the diversity that I've grown, because before I moved to Pennsylvania, I was growing 200 or 300 different varieties of corn yearly, doing adaptation trials and breeding, as well as researching the variety for the corn book that I released last fall. And all of this diversity, I always find it mind-blowing, like you said, when you plant something and you get all of this incredible diversity out of something that's not even what it looked like when you planted it. And it happens a lot in the seed world, and most people kind of freak out because they're like, well, this is contaminated with something. It's not supposed to be like this. But especially with corn, and beans can do it too as far as that goes. It's not just corn. But you get something that is, you plant something that may be a solid blue corn or a solid white corn, and you'll start getting random pink kernels, random white kernels, and it kind of throws you off. But I tell people that you have to realize that, especially if you're growing a corn that may not be native to where you're living at, that it's going to be stressed and it's going to kind of kick itself into overdrive, kind of to want to be sure it reproduces. And plants have a very unique and amazing ability to dig back into their lineage and pull out these weird mutations or these weird traits that we may not necessarily know it until after it happens, but the plants know that if they throw these random colors or something, it'll add more diversity. It'll protect the gene pool. It'll keep the plants healthy, or whatever they feel is needed. And growing all of the corn I've grown and planting something that's supposed to be only blue and getting white and pink in it when I know it's pure, it amazes me. And even when you plant multicolored corn, it's like every ear is still different, even then. And I always get overly excited. People have to tell me, calm down, it's just an ear of corn. Well, to you it is, but to me it's a Christmas gift.
Serious. No, it's like when I was opening them, it was just like meeting something new for the first time, you know. And the guy who sent them to me said that that he studied with a native man in the 70s, and so he's been doing native outgrowths for a while. And he said that what he's kind of discovered and what he's been told too is that the corn, especially when it travels and another person grows it, it includes that person's data and DNA and their information into their program. So every time those go out, then they'll have another adaption in there. And you know, and you think about like consciously, like that means that you want to be really good to the corn. You know what I mean? Like you want to treat it really well because it's taking that whole experience with you into actually database that it can actually share, you know, wherever it goes. So you never want to like mistreat it or harm it. You know what I mean? Or give it, you know, bad messages. It's like, you know, it's like a mini little computer chip.
Mm-hmm. It is. And that's why a lot of the native ways of planting, they always tell you to plant your corn, but not just your corn, any of the other of your garden in good energy, in good spirits, in good faith, and don't be angry when you're planting it because it'll carry over. Or if you're really sad or something, don't plant something because that'll carry over too. And your corn will remember that, or your beans or your sunflowers, and it'll kind of taint the plant almost if that happens. And that's why I try to plant everything in a good mindset, and like you said, be kind to them, because they do carry this information with them as they travel, and they always have for thousands of years, especially corn and the general sacredness it's held for thousands of years. But all of these plants have carried that, and it travels each generation, and it has all of this new memory in its database. And if it feels like it needs part of this, then it can kind of pull up the historical file like it was a computer and download this or download that, or even delete this and delete that in order to survive or adapt. And that's one of the amazing things about plants that I always enjoy, and especially getting people to realize how much like computers, you said, just like they are basically a living computer. It's astounding to see that. And I don't know, it's just it still is hard for me to process at times, because here I am staring at this corn plant knowing that maybe this particular variety has existed for like 5,000 years. And it kind of sinks in that you realize that's like 5,000 different databases. And it's probably about triple that, because this corn was grown in a region that's warmer than us. So they could have had 2 or 3 crops of this. And every time it moved somewhere else, all of this memory was downloaded and stored in it. And here you are in your garden growing something that has like probably the equivalent of like NASA satellites floating above Earth, just held within in one little seed. It's the sacred gift of life, and I don't know. It amazes me, and I nerd out very deeply the more I think about it.
No, it's good to nerd out. Seeds are a good thing to nerd out because, I used to think, what was the most important, like if I categorized it, what would be up until this whole, I was big at growing food, teaching people how to do core food production and all this other stuff. I've been doing it for a while, since I got out of Rudolph Steiner College. Anywhere people would let me grow something, I would grow it. I can do your whole yard. Okay, can I spend 3 months here? Okay, I'm going to get rid of all this, and we're going to put this in. We're going to grow. So then and now I'm involved with the native, plants, and it has just really kind of escalated into, it's probably going to be like an obsession, actually. I think I'm moving kind of into that category. So I like to nerd out about seeds. So, all right, let's move on to the subject about the, we were talking on the little chat box on break, and my guest thought it would be good to talk about the corn. The corn has always been a mother. So, because there's a lot of, spiritual, traditions or native spirituality around the corn and the corn mother in some cases. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I can, because it's something that a lot of people don't really they not necessarily understand. It just never crosses their mind that a plant like corn is a mother. But like wheat in Europe became a kind of like a mother. Well, corn became the mother grain of the Americas because it was productive. It fed so many people. It could be easily carried and easily stored. You could have dozens of uses for it. And it just supported all of these ancient people and their civilizations and helped them build it. The Mayan Empire would have been as large as it was had it not been for corn. The Aztecs, and a lot of this ancient association with mother comes from the belief in, to most of the cultures in Europe, they called her Gaia, or the earth, basically. And all of the ancient people of the Americas always saw corn as a form of Mother Earth. And it became the corn mother. And all of these ancient tribal stories tell of this female figure that she had children, she had some sons, and she sacrificed herself to feed her family, and she was the mother of corn, and this is how corn came to the people. And all of this whole mother association is rooted in ancient Mesoamerican culture, which is something that I've dove in very deeply to understand a lot of the corn I have and what it meant back then. And corn and other plants, they were seen in a unique view that the Aztecs known as duality. Corn was female, yes, but it was also male at the same time, because it is one of those plants that has male and female flowers and fruiting ability all within the same plant, like beans. Beans are the same way. And squash has separate male and female flowers, but corn has separate male and female parts within the same plant. So they kind of seen this whole thing as corn was basically a mother. However, it also had other male qualities to it. So a lot of these spiritual beings, the gods and goddesses that were associated with corn, they were male and female equivalent. For the Aztecs, she was Chicomacuatl, known by 1,000 different variations in her name when they met a new tribe in Mexico, and she would travel up into the United States and become all of the Native American tribal corn mothers. For the Cherokee, for my people, it was it's Selu, the corn mother, and she also had a male counterpart in Mexico called Zenteatl. He was the maize cob lord, and all of these beings floated around the fact that corn was sacred, and to the Mayans and the Aztecs, actually their blood. And this is why that corn was used in the most sacred ceremonies as offerings to the earth, to the deities that they worshipped, and that they ate the same thing that they ate because they knew that this stuff was what was feeding them, and that they really wouldn't exist without it. And the other side of the corn mother ideal is that a lot of these native tribes, the seed keepers that would keep this stuff going and that would pass it down, they were actually the women. The men would be out hunting or foraging. The women did too, at least the foraging, but the men would have to be out doing other things. And it was the women that would plant and tend the garden and save the seed and keep it going. This is also where that comes in, especially when it's passed down from grandmother to another female in the tribe, and usually it was family that it would be passed down to. But corn has always been seen as a mother grain, and I don't think that will ever die out per se, because especially in Mesoamerica, it's still held basically just as sacred as it was 5,000 years ago. That's really not changed all that much there. And I don't know, it's an interesting topic for people to realize that women played a role in a lot of this stuff than they thought, and that's why one reason also why the corn mother is a mother. But corn is a life giver, and so is the mother, and that's also why it's interesting when you look at corn in other regions, especially of the Americas, that it symbolized birth, death, and rebirth. And the Aztecs and Mayans would always say that they planted the flesh of their mother, the seed, into the dark soil, and the other spirits would help it germinate to the top, and it would go through these cycles of going through different variations of the mother, from a little girl to her middle youth, all the way up to a worn-out grandmother after the season. And even in the cycle of life, the corn was at the central heart of birth, since it not only births part fertilization, it just represented like the human life cycle, and that became very deeply associated with the crop too. A lot of the ceremonial uses were for not only overcoming sickness, but for celebrating a new baby that was born, or even celebrating someone that died, or as an offering for the person when they passed away. Kind of like the Day of the Dead ceremony. A lot of corn used to be used in that.
Wow, you have a lot of information. No, I'm super excited. Those are great things. I'm so glad that, we're having this discussion. So you said that you wrote a corn book. Do you want to tell us what the name of the book is in case people are interested in getting it? Can they get it?
They can get it. It is on Amazon. I believe it's about $20 or $30. I think 30. But it's about 300 pages. It is completely full color. There's 12 chapters in it, and it basically starts from the beginning of corn's history all the way up to giving people photographs of all of these different corns from all over the world, not just the Americas, but from Africa, from Europe, from the Caribbean islands. And there's even chapters in there that tells you how to save seed of it, what to do, what not to do, how to grow it, what soil you need, all of that stuff. I kind of made it an all-to book, so to speak, on growing heirloom corn.
What's the name? What's the name of the book?
It is called Maize, Roots, Shoots, and Moccasin Boots.
Oh, how cute is that? Okay. Maize, roots, shoots,
and moccasin boots.
Cool. I'm going to get it.
And there will be a updated version. I was hoping to have it finished this year, but I've had health problems and I've been so busy too that it's not happened. But a different titled, even more updated version with probably more pictures will hopefully come out sometime next year. I don't know the title of it yet. I haven't decided on it, but there will be a second edition. But the first one is still very beautiful. People always comment about the beautiful cover and the photography that it has, but it took me about a year and a half to write it. And I don't know, I love it because it kind of just compiles everything that I have in my head. And the second one would do that even more. But I don't know, I just wanted it to kind of tell the story of corn and also teach people about the diversity and the impact that it's had on the world, as well as get them interested in growing it when they see all these this corn from Peru that looks like it's been in a peppermint factory because it's red and white striped, or if it's a brown corn or something like that. So I think people always have enjoyed it when they've read it, and I'm hoping to make the second edition just as great and even better as I can, especially with more pictures. That's what people always tell me.
Yeah, we like the pictures. So, okay, so on a different, kind of on the same topic, on a different topic. So this is kind of something I don't know, I guess, unraveled for me, growing the corn and dealing with some of these seeds that I dealt with. I thought it was really interesting that watching this summer, and you said some of the same exact stuff I said about what the corn attracted this year. These insects and massive praying mantises and insects I've never seen, and native bees and all these different things. So do you think, okay, so in the past, my native teachers that I've studied with, believe that we are going through a major shift. But their belief is, like, it doesn't really matter if it's going to be a really bad shift, if the earth, is going to flip or whatever is going to happen, or if, we segue kind of into a more positive situation. But they're prepared for, going through this and then the after event. And, having worked with the seeds this year, watching the situations in the world, and also sometimes when you're dealing with stuff like soil and growing food and a lot of the information you see that's really disheartening, or forests being torn down, or a lot of these things that work kind of against what I feel like the work I'm doing. This was the summer that I actually, and I might get teary-eyed, but that I had like major hope renewed. And I feel like the corn, and the plants did that. They brought in all these different communities of all these insects that, you think that are extinct or that don't exist anymore. And then all of a sudden you see them, come out of nowhere, and they're building this community with the native seeds. And then they're building this community with you. And it's like, I feel like the seeds, a lot of them have been in hiding, like a lot of them have been waiting. And now it's time for them to move forward. And my friend, that's the other seed grower, the native seed grower, he said that, with his work with dealing with the corn and the native seeds, is that he feels that once enough of us carry these, seeds forward, and we start growing them and we return them and doing all this stuff, he feels that it'll change the course and destination of the earth and start to heal, the destruction. So having grown these seeds this year, really seeing all the insects, meeting, new insects that I hadn't met before, and seeing them in areas where I've lived like my whole life and never had seen them before, kind of made me feel like maybe that's true. Maybe the seeds and the farmer, are going to save the world. So anyway, sorry about that. I just get kind of emotional when I think about, a lot of us doing this work and the reasons we're doing the work. And sometimes I just feel like everything's working, harder and harder against me. And this summer was the year that I really realized, like, if I just do the corn and I do the work and I help it to grow, that it has everything that it needs. And these native seeds have been waiting for a long time, and they have everything that they need in them, all the codes and everything, to actually restructure, this world. And all I have to do is get them in the ground,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even most of us in the seed industry that I know, we all joke in one sense, but at the same time, we know deep down that we are the people that will, I guess, fix the world per se, but at least help heal the world, heal the environment. Like you said, these seed, they already know what they need. They know what the world needs. They're not stupid. They're smart. They have to be. And they're not, I'm sure they're not happy with things have been going on and all the environmental destruction. But they know that they can be part of the healing process, and that's why I try to spread not only my message, but spread seed. Because like you said, if enough people can start growing this stuff, then they'll start to kind of see the value of it and start learning the lessons that the seed can teach us. And that'll spread from person to person, neighborhood to neighborhood, community to community, county by county, state by state, and soon nationally and globally. And I think if we can ever get enough native seed and just heirloom seed and stuff like that into the world or into more hands and get people to start kind of growing it and getting into it like I did, you did, and all the other seed folks I know, I think that the world will change and it'll be an even better place, so to speak, because all these seeds and their lessons, they can impact our lives. You and I have, throughout this conversation, we've shared our own experiences, and I'm sure some of the listeners, they have their own as well, and there's tons of this stuff all out in the world. And we know that this happens, and if the whole world can just learn from what the seeds have told us, that, I mean, it's prophecy too for a lot of these tribes. The Hopi have it, the Aztecs had it, that previously there were four worlds that were destroyed, and we're in the fifth one. And depending on how we behave, so to speak, and how we continue our relationship with the earth will depend on how everything shifts, if it shifts for the better or for the worse, if it stays stagnant and in limbo, or whatever is gonna happen. But I always try to give people seed, especially corn, because it's the obsession. And I tell people that I bleed seed and my blood is corn. And I usually just try to spread as many seeds as I can, because even if you give it to someone that may not have any idea, any clue of its history or anything, when they kind of get into growing it, they start realizing all this stuff, and that's when they start seeing a different perspective and realize that healing is not just government per se, or it's just medicine. That seeds were the kind of the original medicine, and by planting and cultivating them, we can cultivate a brighter future and a stronger connection with ourselves, our spirit, and with the world in general, and help understand it and each other a lot better.
Yeah, I was shocked at how amazing corn is about community and all the different like insects that came together to support it. I mean, literally, flocked to it from who knows where. Yeah, the corn probably can just teach people more about community, just to learn that and come together Anyway, I was thinking about all the stuff that you said. It just has been such a great conversation to have, just for me. And the only time I cry on radio is when I'm talking about seeds, especially the native seeds.
I understand. It's okay. That's me too. That's me too. It's okay.
I don't know. Yeah. I feel like a big baby kind of. Anyway, all right. So we're coming into like the last, about 15, 17 minutes. Is there anything that you thought about that you might talk about on the show beforehand, or you had some ideas of what you maybe wanted to present to the listeners? And first, I want to tell people you can find him on Facebook, Seeds of Preservation Independence, and he also has a website under the same name. And Stephen Smith. And he's an amazing guy, changing the world. All right, so do you have anything that you want to offer to our listeners for the last section of the show?
Really, it's kind of the advice thing that I end up doing it and not know I do it until someone kind of shakes their finger at me. But even if any of you guys listening or have been listening to us, even if you may not want to grow your own food, not everyone wants to. It is more convenient to go pick it up at a market or something. But I encourage you to buy a pack of seed. It doesn't have to be heirloom, although I would recommend it. And maybe get a large flower pot. Get some potting soil, and if you have a balcony, start growing it on your balcony. If you have part of your yard, maybe turn a little square section of it into a edible landscape, and just get yourself involved in seed can teach us, and see the beauty of just the life, of the gift of life, of seeing something so small grow into a full-grown plant that produces twice as much as the one little seed that you put in the ground. And also, for any of the younger people that may be my age or around my age might also be listening, and or if you know people like that, one of the mindsets that I did grow up with is that the youth, or gardeners actually in general, can't change the world, or they can't do anything to positively impact society or whatever. And I can definitely say from experience and from people I know that is completely wrong, and that starting with something as simple as growing your own tomato plant, or growing your own peppers, or growing your own corn or squash or beans or whatever, it can teach you a lot about the world and a lot about yourself. And I think a lot of us are kind of lost. We've lost ourselves. And I think we can find ourselves, find healing, and find the world through growing and planting seed. And that's something I tend to try to encourage people to do as well, because it can teach us younger people more about ourselves and more about the world, and just know that you're not powerless per se, and that planting a seed can have the most great life-changing experience you may ever have in your entire life. And it can teach you what 500 books could teach you, and just being outdoors, out in nature, and growing your own food, knowing where it comes from, and just knowing the diversity that we have, and what has sustained our species for thousands of years or hundreds of thousands of years. And that's somewhat of the message that is in May's root shoots and moccasin boots. But it's also something that I kind of just give as a little kick of advice. And if people follow it, they'll understand what not only what I'm saying, but what we've been kind of talking about this entire conversation.
All right. So let me down. All right, there we go. Okay, so what is going to be in your future? Tell me what's going to be in your future.
Well, I plan on staying with the Roughwood Seed Collection in Pennsylvania as long as I can. This year was kind of the get into everything and understand it, and we're trying to get it restructured as a bigger nonprofit. That way I can take Soapy and put it under that umbrella and have both organizations instead of merging them together. That was the initial idea, but I'd rather keep them separate. And I don't know, I plan on not collecting any more seeds, but every time I say that, I get like 12 more in the mail. And I can't say no to a seed, especially corn. And that's also my problem. So my seed collection will keep growing, and I'll keep writing books. I actually have a novel that kind of will address a lot of what we talked about. I hope to be published within the next couple of years. And I'm just going to keep growing and saving seed and traveling to visit some of these native communities and talk with them and give lectures and presentations and just kind of ride that seed wave as long as I can, and just hope that I impact enough lives of enough people that we can start getting some good shifting back into the world. And really that's what I've wanted to do with why I do what I do, is to help others. And I've actually learned more about myself and found myself more as going through this entire journey, because it is a journey. And I just plan on keeping on that path and just chugging along with the seed and trying to get more out on the market for people to be able to purchase not only the seed, but the actual produce itself. And I also am working on some breeding programs for adaptation of these unique things that people can grow in high elevation areas or in deserts or in super swampy areas and stuff like that. So I have a lot in the works, and I'm just gonna kind of take it as it plays out, live day by day, and just continue to follow what the ancestors keep telling me and wanting me to do, and just keep being me, basically.
Well, I have to say, I cannot wait to see what all the work that you've done by the time you're 30. You're truly like a major inspiration. I'm super jealous. I wish I had your life. No, I'm just starting to embark that way on the corn. But yeah, super inspiring, and thanks for being really open about having a broad discussion about the different kinds of layers of the native seeds and the spiritual. Another thing too, I think that we didn't really talk about was that the corn was everything to the tribe that had it, and they all had different types of corns, and so they would marry as a result of bringing corn together. It was their money, it was their barter, it was their trade, it was their survival. The corn was their mother and their friend, and sometimes protector. So in a very modern terms, that's the corn was everything for them, and they buried a hole under the ground and they let the mother, take care of their seed, and cover it up, and keep it good for them. So that was their stashes or their money vaults.
Most certainly. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So what is okay, we got just a few more minutes, but is there any story in particular that really stands out about corn that you've heard or that's been passed down, or, ceremonies or anything one of those things that's in your mind that's super interesting always that comes to mind?
It's not necessarily what I've been told. It's more so what I've kind of learned as I've grown all of this corn and all of these seed, is that as corn migrated, people migrated too. They also settled, and they also spread not only the corn, but how to cook it. The religion that was associated with it, the rituals, the ceremonies, all of this stuff spread with this corn. And it's kind of the story that I always tell people, because they don't realize that by the time that Columbus landed in what he called India, or whatever that was, it really wasn't. There were already trade routes between Native Americans all the way from Canada down to the coast of Argentina and Chile. And corn spread up and down these migratory routes. And that's something that I always try to spread, that I've learned. But one of the stories that I've read and also kind of been told and also figuring out on my own is one of the ancient versions of the Aztec origin of corn, of how the feathered serpent Quetzalcoatl, he and all of the other divine were looking down at the newly created humans for this new world, and saw that they were starving, and one of the gods, he actually cut his own skin off and planted it in the soil to teach corn how to germinate and grow. And then the corn mother, she planted her whole body in the ground so corn could be fruitful, and they could harvest the fruits of the earth and thus her. But the feathered serpent, he happens to be looking down at these starving people, and they don't know what they're going to feed the new humans. And he happens to look down at the world again, and he sees this little black or red ant with a corn kernel in its jaws. So he comes down to earth, and he speaks to the ant and asks, well, where did you get this from? The ant first is hesitant to tell him about it, but they continue having a conversation, and the ant explains the sacredness of the corn because the ant already knew how valuable it was. And the feathered serpent, he finally convinces the ant to tell him that there is a mountain called Sustenance Mountain, that corn and all these other seeds like beans and chia and squash are stored in. And he tries to turn himself into an ant, but he can't bring enough of it back, just one kernel. And that's when it becomes the grain of the gods. So he gets the weather spirit to send a bolt of lightning to strike this mountain and hit split. So, and he's able to give corn and all other seeds to humans, and it's what sustains them. He teaches them what the ant taught him, of its sacred value, of all the lessons and everything that it can be told, or that can be told and learned from it. That's one of my favorite story of corn that I've read and been told.
That is an amazing story. That's just an amazing story. I love that. I love stories. I love it. I love it. Love it. It was a good story. All right. So, do you want to leave us with, we have 2 minutes, and is there anything that came to mind that you'd like to leave us with? And then that'll be the end of the show. And thank you so much for coming on the show. And also, hopefully I can get you back. Would you like to come back in January? And,
I'd be happy to.
Oh, awesome.
I'd be happy to.
I love it. I love it. All right. So, okay. Is there anything else that you would like to leave people with?
If anyone listening, or even you yourself, Bridgette, I have a personal Facebook page that I share all of these stories some of what I've been telling, and pictures, and seeds as well. So you can find my personal Facebook page, Steve Smith, as well. And I think my name on there is my Cherokee name, White Wolf. So if you want to, you can send me a friend request if you want to, or send me a message, or whatever anyone wants to do. And I always try to share a lot of pictures and stuff. That way people can know the story and see the seed I'm talking about. So I encourage people to connect with me, because it's the best way to get a hold of me.
Yeah, no, I love it. So, all right. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and really great stories and super great information. And I just, I'm so grateful we finally were able to hook up, because we had some trouble trying to schedule. But, sometimes I think like the energy has to be right too, so it had to be like, however the corn wanted us to like talk about it and when to talk about it.
Exactly. I agree. I agree completely. 100%.
So anyway, thanks so much for coming on. And that's the end of our show. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. Bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. Revolution Radio.
You don't see it, do you? How close we are to absolute chaos? The sick ones are sitting on their fat asses, eating and drink themselves into a stupor, polluting the world without a second thought while it goes down the toilet. Nobody wants to do the nasty work. The shit that we all just think about. Most good citizens are just along for the ride and then bitch and moan and complain about everything when it doesn't work out. Not me. Get it done.
Revolution Radio, where we do the nasty work. www.freedomslips.com.
This is the people's war. It is our war. We are the fighters. Fight it then. Fight it with all that is in us. And may God defend the right.
Warning! Warning!
We gotta stop them! They're gonna kill us all!
See how the trouble you've started?
Be they the government, be they industry, be they organized labor, be they anyone, or human beings. Time when the operation of the machine becomes so odious, makes you so sick at heart that you can't take part. You can't even passively take part. And you've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, by all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Revolution Radio
of freedomslips.com, the #1 listener-supported talk radio station, throwing ourselves upon the gears of the machine. Revolution Radio, where information never sleeps.
You called down the thunder, well now you got it. Right, you tell them I'm coming, and hell's coming with me, you hear? Hell's coming with me!
Revolution Radio! The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio.